Hey guys, remember how Metroid Dread came out? Remember how Metroid Dread is a real game that actually exists? Man, what the fuck? Let's talk about it, shall we? This is actually a video I've wanted to make since the game came out, since I beat Metroid Dread. You know, like 2 days after it launched back in 2021. But it's a bit out of my usual comfort zone of cartoons and like AVGN. That being said, I vowed that my channel would be about me at the end of the day, and you cannot begin to know who Wyatt Phillips is without knowing his obsession with Metroid. Sure, OKKO may be my favorite Western cartoon, Gurren Lagann may be my favorite overall show, but without a doubt my favorite thing on this god-forsaken rock we call home is Metroid. I've made a few unscripted videos about it, but I feel like talking about Dread and why I like Metroid specifically deserves a more in-depth analysis. Without a doubt, no hyperbole, Metroid Dread was the game I was the most excited for in my entire life. I truly cannot think of a single thing, game or otherwise, that consumed my every waking thoughts as much as Metroid Dread did. I want to talk about why, I want to talk about what it was like to play it, and how I feel about it years removed from the fervor. This isn't going to be a normal review. I have very little interest in dissecting the mechanics or the minutiae of the game like that. I do not claim to be an expert in game design, nor do I claim to be an expert of animation production. I just like to hear myself talk and make others listen to me. So before we dig into the main course, let's get some basics out of the way in regards to my attachment to Metroid. One of my earliest gaming memories is Metroid related. Way back before the numbers 9 and 11 were anything but an emergency number, I had my little Pikachu yellow Game Boy Color and a copy of Metroid 2 with the label peeled off. Metroid 2 is a game modern fans will claim is too cryptic or too old for the tastes of modern gamers, but I think that's just another example of adults pretending to know what's best for kids. I was 6, and even then the game was 9 years old at that point. Not only did I play it constantly and understand intuitively how to progress through the game, because, you know, it's an excellently crafted game, I beat it in only a few months of play. It was the first time a video game ever made me cry, too. The final scene of the hatching of the last Metroid egg and the peaceful trip back to the ship is one of the reasons Metroid is unmatched in terms of the rest of its self-named genre for me. The potent and bittersweetness of spending an entire game gleefully eradicating an entire alien race, only to be face to face with the most brutal and monstrous of them all, only to then kill her and realize deep down that that was just a mother protecting her last baby. Ignoring other M, the fact that Metroid can handle these deeper themes of motherhood across the 5 main games and do so with a character in a body-obscuring robot suit, a giant brain, a giant crab lizard, all not very traditionally feminine, I think speaks to the craft of the series and the strength of its themes and storytelling without using much in the way of text. I would then become obsessed with Fusion and Prime 2, and then Zero Mission. One after another, the games kept rolling into my life and I happily ate them up. They consumed my every thought. I daydreamed about battles Samus had or the lives of the Chozo before they disappeared and fantasized what I would want in an ideal Metroid game. I always thought the dual nature of the Chozo was fascinating, that all recorded evidence of them in modern history were as peace-loving tech wizards that shared their science with the galaxy. But then you explore their planets and you see so many murals of warriors and combat. The suit you wear is for combat. The upgrades you find to help you explore, well, they also help you kill more efficiently. That doesn't seem very pacifist to me. The hype around Prime 3 was absolutely the most I had ever been excited about anything in my life up to that point. Getting to finally play Super Metroid on the Wii Virtual Console and see the series' defining game in action was a dream come true. For those few days that I dived into Zebes, I was fully immersed. The world felt like everything I wanted from the series, and it was right here all along back in 1993. The conclusion of Super Metroid always stood out as the peak of the series to me. Hell, in some ways, it's the peak of the entire medium of video games for me. You confront the Mother Brain and smoke her ass with ease, then she gets up again and you barely put a dent in her. Despite being a walking god of destruction, you don't stand a chance against Mother Brain. She completely annihilates you, going so far as to drain all of your ammo as well. Then, the baby Metroid shows up again. Across the first 3 games, we see the tale of the Metroids, from weapons, to animals on their own home, to a friend and a surrogate daughter. One that would not only spare your life, but save it from mortal danger and then sacrifice herself for the only family that they've ever had. But there's a cruel twist. Saving the baby Metroid wasn't a pure act of altruism from Samus. Guilt was involved, but it was also in her self-interest. She gave up the baby for research for the good of humanity, blindly believing things would work out for the best, without even considering how this creature must feel. So soon after being born to be taken away from her mother who, frankly, doesn't give a shit about her. That's what makes the final boss so impactful to me. All at once, Samus realizes the magnitude of what she was a part of, and why the baby saved her, and she's filled with the rage and power she needs to destroy the Mother Brain. All conveyed with no words, perfectly paying off 3 games worth of story in a way that even conventional storytelling like books and movies and TV shows have a hard time accomplishing, let alone video games, and let alone one in 1993 on the Super Nintendo, made by Nintendo. But it all hits, and it hits hard because you played it and you got invested in the beauty of the world you explored and let your imagination go wild and fill in all the blanks, and it gave you something better than your imagination could have ever given you. Years passed, and I would revisit the series frequently. Other M came out, and I played it once and never again. I followed the excellent AM2R across 8 years of development, playing each demo as they released. Metroid 2 is a big deal in this household, so I was absolutely hyped for that. Then, the unthinkable happened. We got an announcement for Metroid Prime 4 and a last-minute official remake of Metroid 2. I know a lot of Metroid fans prefer the fan game to the official game, but it was absolutely a holy shit 2 cakes moment for me. Not the least because the last time they remade a game, they added a ton of new and excellent story content. The Zero Mission credits theme into the slow zoom in on Samus' childhood drawing of her and Old Bird and Grey Voice may still be the absolute best post-credit stinger I've ever seen. Hoo boy, did this game deliver. I have never played a game where the very idea of the sequel tease was about 1,000 times more exciting than the actual game. Don't get me wrong, Samus Returns is a great game, and I stand by that. I think in recent years it's easy to write off, especially considering Metroid Dread's prodigious qualities, but so much about the game works, and it's a fun remix of Metroid 2 in its own way. The melee was fun, the new boss fights were incredible, and I really enjoyed the more puzzly world design. But let's talk about that secret teaser. No, not the X-Parasite eating the Hornode, though that is great. I'm talking about the Chozo memories, baby. Metroid Prime is its own massive rabbit hole, so I'll hold off on that for now. Maybe I'll make a video about it when Prime 4 is coming out, but I was obsessed with the Chozo and the Chozo lore in Primes 1 and 3. So them bringing a visual equivalent to Samus Returns was a dream come true. Full stop. They gotta put a logbook into Metroid 6. I would fucking foam at the goddamn mouth for that. But I digress. There are 10 images that tell the tragic tale of the Chozos settling on SR-388, the creation of the Metroids, and then their escape from certain doom. It all culminates into the final image of a group of warrior Chozo coming to rescue the scientists. But when you get 100% in every area and go to that image again, holy fuck, I cannot describe the feeling that this gave me. It still gives me chills. The idea that this was really happening was way more exciting than the game around it. I spent over 15 years, constantly thinking about the history of the Chozo, what they must have been like, and their dual nature. Only in my wildest dreams did I think, it'd be pretty cool if there was some bad Chozo that you had to fight. And yet, here we are, a dangling thread there for the plucking. I know fans for years have been obsessed with this whole evil Federation plotline, but I personally was never really sold on that. This, though, a Metroid 5 made by Mercury Steam in 2.5D with a plot focused on this evil Chozo warlord, you could not possibly construct a more come-worthy game for me specifically. The only thing that would possibly put it over the edge is if they named it Metroid Dread.
Yo! Metroid Dread! What?
Metroid Dread? That's a cool title.
Dread!
What?
Yeah! No way!
Yeah! We're here. We're finally talking about the game now. But before we dig in completely, just a teensy bit more context in the lead up. First of all, between Samus Returns and Dread's reveal was like the absolute soul-crushing announcement of Prime 4 being rebooted. 2.5 years passed from that demoralizing point in my life, and after the frankly bad sales of Samus Returns, I honestly had no idea when we'd see another 2D Metroid, let alone one that followed on the thread from Chozo Memory 11. I remember chatting with some friends before recording a podcast about hopes and dreams regarding the upcoming Nintendo Direct at E3 2021. One friend was telling me rumors about a 2D Metroid, which I was skeptical of. The other said he was hoping for a new Donkey Kong. Well, Alex, sorry buddy, I got mine, biatch. Metroid is back, baby. The months leading up to launch were a dream. Not even in a purely good way, in a like manic fever dream kind of way. I dutifully glued my eyes to every fucking electron of visual information regarding this game pre-launch. Every trailer, every website update, maybe too much, but hey, I can confidently say that it was the most I've ever anticipated anything. I think my own wedding will be a letdown comparatively, as well as when I win the lottery. I had dreams at least once a week for months about me playing the game. Dreams so vivid, some of them have just become memories of me actually playing the game. I watched those precious few hours of treehouse footage over and over again, like I was trying to solve a fucking crime. I rewatched reaction streams repeatedly to feel everyone's joy again. Hell, I still do this from time to time. That's how much of an impression it all left on me. Let me really break it down here. Mercury Steam was making another Metroid. It was brand new. It was Metroid 5. It followed the story thread set up in Samus Returns, and it was fucking Metroid Dread? Metroid Dread, a game I was very familiar with as my time as an internet cretin began back in 2005, right when the rumors of Dread began to creep up. So, to see all these things come true, the stars to align, by the time that October rolled around, I was almost numb. One of my housemates got COVID, and because I was unvaccinated at the time, I had to quarantine longer than they did, 20 days. I was concerned at first because I had no more PTO left for Dread Day, but this weird bit of divine irony allowed me to play my dream game uninterrupted for the next 3 weeks. Let me tell you, my balls have never been more drained than by the end of that bizarre vacation. So, why don't we finally get into the game now? What, like 15 minutes into the video? The gameplay. Oh my god, how do I even begin here? I've played every Metroid game until the wheels fell off, the paint vanished, and all the metal rusted away into atoms. Metroid Fusion I have beaten over 100 times, and I am not even a speedrunner. I also try to play every major Metroidvania that I come across. Metroid Dread is the best feeling one, hands down. It might be the best feeling game I've ever played. Zero Mission and Samus Returns already nailed giving a more fast-paced edge to Metroid, but this game goes completely fucking beast mode with it. Smooth 60 FPS, Samus moves at a breakneck pace, there's a huge field of view, there's a slide? Come on! Maybe the single biggest complaint about Samus Returns was the melee counter. Now, that never really bothered me too much. Yes, it was easy to abuse, but I think the vast majority of people are overusing it purely because they are just allergic to using missiles to kill enemies quickly. Plus, once you get about halfway through the game, you are strong enough to mulch enemies without even using missiles before you could even counter them. But I do agree that the mechanic needed some work for it to truly feel natural. At the end of the day, Samus Returns was a slower paced game, and partially because of that melee counter. Ooh, mama, the dash melee delivers. Simply by adding the ability to melee counter while moving, and allowing that to deal damage, and slowly increasing the damage dealt with each suit upgrade, literally perfect. How can such a small tweak improve such a divisive mechanic by like 1,000%? Smaller enemies die to it and you can just keep running. This combined with the slide, the game speed being turned up, and the smooth 60 FPS makes it immaculate to play. Literally still the best controls I've ever felt in any video game, let alone Metroidvania. I don't want to spend too much time comparing it to other titles. My intention isn't to rate this game, but to talk about how I feel about it, if that distinction makes any sense, but I would be remiss not to acknowledge my snobbery. There is about 100 fucking thousand Metroidvania games on Steam, and plenty of them are very good. Some incorrect people even like these games more than Metroid. My stance as a super fan remains that nobody can quite do it like Metroid. No, not even Castlevania. But I'm also willing to meet these games halfway and enjoy their unique takes on my favorite game genre. And I think difficulty is maybe the trickiest thing for me to vibe with. 9 times out of 10, these games are just way too goddamn hard in a really obnoxious or unnecessary way. Mostly because of Dark Souls, and I have never beaten Dark Souls, but its godforsaken specter looms larger than fucking Super Metroid or Symphony of the Night over every indie Metroidvania at this point. Now, there's nothing wrong with a game being difficult, but I'd say Dread strikes a perfect balance. The exploration and moment-to-moment gameplay is not super challenging, especially if you played the series 100 times, but the bosses do offer possibly the greatest yet most fair challenge of any of the bosses in the whole Metroid series. Tough bosses in other Metroid games are either just weirdly punishing and unbalanced like the Boost Guardian, or janky as hell like the Alpha Blog, or require entirely different gameplay than normal combat like the Spider Guardian, and wow, all of those examples are from Prime 2. Something is wrong with that game. The first big spike in difficulty in Dread is with Kraid, the second major boss, and let me tell you, as a longtime Metroid fan, I am so glad to have a fight with Kraid that's not a complete joke like it was in Super and Zero Mission. Even now, having played this game a dozen times or more, I still get my ass kicked on my first attempt if I'm a little bit rusty. In general, the difficulty reminds me of a lot of the really finely tuned retro games. Ninja Gaiden on the NES is one of my big faves, and that's a classically hard as fuck game, but in my opinion, it's only hard until it all clicks. Once you get it, it not only becomes a breeze, but it feels absolutely fantastic to blow through the game. Samus Returns dabbled in this. It was certainly much harder than previous Metroid games, but it lacked the depth and finesse of Dread. The streamlined movement and controls, the variety of actions, and the excellent pace of exploration to boss fights, once you understand the enemies and bosses, you truly become a master of this world, and the game is fine-tuned to make sure that anybody can feel this way. This is what I feel Metroid does best above all the other copycats. The sense of progression feels so much more satisfying when it's not just about raising your levels or getting better equipment, or where there's a skill ceiling so high and a world so dangerous that even basic traversal becomes a chore. When you get an upgrade in Dread, it more often than not busts the world open and slowly unravels its knot. The greatness of a good Metroid game is not in how open it is, but the satisfaction in that progress, in going from stumbling like a clown to becoming that walking god of destruction. Metroid wears this factor proudly on its sleeve with the series staple screw attack. By the end of a given game, you can literally destroy anything in moments with the attack, save for bosses of course. Now again, I love Hollow Knight, and I think in some ways it far exceeds Dread, and we will get into that later. But as much as the world and characters shine in that game, playing it can be kind of a chore. I guess the point is that games can be more than the sum of their parts in that regard. The whole picture painted by the playing experience of a Metroid game ideally feels like a masterfully crafted yet small portrait rather than a gigantic tapestry or some other art metaphor. I think the only thing left to go over in this specific section is the level design. I'll get into the theming later, but I'd say the level design is definitely pretty good. Samus Returns had a lot of really smartly designed little puzzle box world chunks, and this delivers a larger scale, more spread out version of that. I think there is one problem with the world design. It's not that it's too linear, because that never really bothered me, but that the Switch hardware makes it impossible to connect the world in a more natural way. Once you know where you're going to be running head first into loading screens like every 2 minutes as you navigate the map. It never really bothered me before, but for whatever reason, this time around it really stood out as supremely awkward. I'm begging the next Nintendo console to have an SSD so we can get more seamless level design like Super Metroid had. We don't need trams and elevators and teleportals. Another thing that can kinda be a buzzkill is the E.M.M.Is, especially when it comes to exploration. Now, I appreciate the idea and think in general it's a pretty cool evolution of the stealth segments from Fusion and Zero Mission, and maybe a little bit of Dig or Not from Samus Returns, but the more that I play the game, the more it kinda just feels like a, oh yeah, this, rather than a ton of fun. It's either so easy it's pointless, or they just spawn right in front of you and then kill you on sight. The few times it is in that in-between, though, can lead to some awesomely pulse-pounding moments where you parry their insta-death attack and are able to make a break for it, or you're sneaking around them just barely dodging detection. Not only do the E.M.M.Is themselves occasionally feel extremely annoying and tedious obstacles rather than exhilarating, but like, a third of each area is fucking consumed by the E.M.M.I zones. Credit where credit is due, though. I absolutely love the moments when you finally get to defeat each E.M.M.I. Even if I know by heart exactly what to do at this point, it's still a tense moment when it's creeping up on you and you barely charge the Omega Cannon in time to hit it. Overall, though, exploring is a lot of fun. I really like how they tune the item pickups, and I think it's at least worth it that the E.M.M.I zones have plenty of hidden goodies. I think it was a smart move to make missile expansions only 2 missiles and then have a new type of expansion be 10 missiles. Makes it so that there's this constant feedback loop, finding little breadcrumb power-ups that may lead you to go searching for bigger power-ups, like the energy tanks and like the Missile Plus, which usually are given for more tricky environmental puzzles or at pivotal moments in the game's main path. Ah yes, the most important part of any Metroid game, the story. When the game was first announced, that glorious day at E3 2021, series producer Yoshio Sakamoto mentioned that this was going to be an end to an era, the final game to tackle the idea of Samus and her relationship with the Metroids. Now, to me, this sounded like vague marketing nonsense, but I was of course curious to see what kind of conclusion the series would come to. I mentioned earlier that the premise of a rogue faction of Chozo is literally the most exciting thing I could have possibly thought of. From Samus Returns, the pre-release trailers, every single morsel of information regarding the Chozo was a glorious mana from heaven. I couldn't sleep most nights, thinking about all the amazing stuff they could do with this premise. For the most part, I think they nailed it. Ravenbeak is a hilarious badass, living up to the premise of an ancient warlord with centuries of experience fighting the new upstart who is just appropriating their culture. The final fight is tense and awesome and brutal on your first few attempts. The resolution of the fight is great, with the Metroid suit being an amazing reveal, not to mention the escape where you are so powerful that merely touching things kills them, let alone blasting them with your gigantic hyper beam. By the way, I am just now, as I'm writing this, realizing the reason that you have the hyper beam is because you drained that power from Ravenbeak. I know that sounds obvious, but I just assumed it was a standard trait for Metroid powers, like in Super Metroid. On the other side of things, the stuff involving Quiet Robe is also great. Finally getting to meet a living Chozo and hear him talk is just surreal. I seriously dreamt of this day, as pathetic as that sounds. and the language feels very real as well, sounding a bit like Arabic or Hebrew, which fits the ancient Egyptian theming of the Chozo. I love this. I don't even care that it's just 5 solid minutes of exposition like a third of the way through the game. That being said, I don't think I'd mind him getting killed off as much if I didn't have other problems with the setup. See, from the trailers and even the promo material, I expected an all-out war against the Mawkin, the warrior tribe. But the truth is, they're all dead and turned into zombies. Only Ravenbeak is still alive. Now, I'm more than fine with the cruel twist of Quiet Robe being revived as a zombie, because that is delightfully creepy and fucked up, but I just wish the planet felt a bit more populated. Maybe fighting 1 or 2 non-robot, non-zombie Mawkin before Ravenbeak releases all of the X-Parasites across the planet and turns all the soldiers into zombies. It's a minor thing, but I was pretty disappointed when I realized the Chozo in the black, red, and gold armor and the promo images were just mindless creatures and not like elite warriors that you had to fight. Functionally, from like a game design standpoint, it's pretty much the same, but it feels so much less cool to fight Chozo with no emotional investment in the battle or any idea of who or what you are. I would have loved, even just as subtext, to tackle the idea of what these warlike traditionalist Chozo would feel about a human child being given their sacred armor. Armor earned only after immense physical and spiritual trials and designed purely for the ultimate warriors of this supposedly superior race, and how satisfying it would be to beat them and prove to their face how wrong they were about you. Honestly though, I really could have forgiven all that. I still like the way the story and world is presented. The moment that you first fight the Mawkin X and it's introduced sitting atop a pile of rubble, unable to do anything but mull over its own lonely existence and isolation inside this prison before it finally sees prey, is still pretty sick. And I absolutely love the second phase of the fights with the Mawkin that has it break down into a melted feral beast, plus the music transition from the driving, indignant fight theme to a corrupted version of itself that sounds like it's deteriorating, is an excellent example of Metroid's ability to tell stories through gameplay and music instead of by more traditional means. And I want to be clear, in no way do I want paragraphs of text every 20 minutes, or Ravenbeak taunting you throughout the game like fucking Neocortex from Crash Bandicoot 2. I think the stuff I proposed could be done with minimal to no text, just pure subtext. But like I said, all of that would be fine. But the ending just kinda sucks. And no, not the finale with Ravenbeak or the final moments on the ship with the zombified Quiet Robe giving his life to help you. All that is also excellent. It's the literal ending that just boggles my mind. Want to know what we got after 19 years? The kind of grand finale we were given to this supposed leg of the journey? The story of Samus and her interwoven fates with the Metroids? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. What the fuck? I can't imagine why they thought this was a good idea. Why hype it up as the end of an era and just end it off with Samus leaving ZDR and then that's it? Go home now. Come back in 4 more years and we'll make Metroid 6 maybe. Come on, Metroid Fusion had a more definitive ending than this. We got our epic clash, our fun last-minute spectacle fight, and even a thought-provoking sacrifice of a creature that we assumed was a mindless villain, but then we also got a nice little ending monologue. And it's not like I want Samus to be in her ship and go, wow, I guess maybe the X-Parasites can't copy the soul, but maybe the soul can exist after death and people can help you from beyond the grave for 5 minutes or whatever on-the-nose thing like that. It's not like Fusion had her excruciatingly summing up the moral of the game, just reflecting on her journey and pondering her future. Closing the book on this adventure and chapter of her life while still leaving things open for more. This ending just screams, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Metroid. Join us next time. It's not the worst thing ever. I mean, my precious Super Metroid pretty much ends the same way, and Prime, my favorite video game on Earth, ends in a hilariously anticlimactic way. But this is supposed to be a big deal. Look, you don't even need text. Zero Mission nails its ending with just the post-credit stinger, and Prime 3 has to reflect on the events of the game without monologuing. Every time I play the game, I want to be okay with this nothing ending. I want to love the journey and even the preceding events, but something just rubs me the wrong way about it. Every single time I have played this game at least 20 times all the way through in 2 years. The last bastion of hope for me was the Chozo memories, which returned from Samus Returns. Unlike that game though, they do not tell a story, they are simply vignettes of cool things that happened in each of the game's areas that you get by 100%ing each zone. They are really cool, don't get me wrong, but there isn't exactly a bombshell plot revelation like the Chozo Memory 11. In fact, there's nothing about where the story could go in these. At least nothing that isn't borderline insane conspiracy ramblings and chasing shadows. Don't worry, I have a separate video planned on my 3 ideas where the story could go after that I've written out in excruciating detail with areas and power-ups. I will get wellness checks from my friends if they watch it. Thankfully, now that I got that out of my system, it's time to talk about one of the game's crowning achievements and the most nebulous category of all, the flavor. A game is often more than the sum of its parts. For me, that's doubly so with Metroid. I said before, I love Hollow Knight and its theming and world and characters are all awesome. Same with the anime gothic Halloween parade of Castlevania. But Metroid just has literally everything I want aesthetically in a fictional world. Or rather, it's because of Metroid that I have my particular tastes. Dread manages to combine the state-of-the-art pristine space station and disarray aesthetic of Fusion and the classic Chozo Ruins vibe into something fresh and new. A modern Chozo facility. We still get plenty of nature too, with areas like Gavoren and Altaria feeling right out of Super. I also love that it takes notes from Fusion in other ways. The X are back, but they don't just sit on their laurels. You get to see firsthand how hopelessly horrific their consumption of an entire planetary ecosystem is. I cannot think of many moments in fiction that filled me with the same amount of, well, dread as that first time back in Gavoren after the parasites are released and you see in real time the life forms being infected and killed and replicated. It's fucking bleak and beautifully done purely through gameplay. On that note, I also love how the X start to alter and destroy the world around you in tangible ways that affect level design. It's a good way to keep you on your toes in the back half of the game, and it was one of my favorite aspects of the world design of Fusion. So glad it returns here, and I do honestly hope it remains a mainstay for the series. Handcrafted little bits like this are so much cooler to me than the absolute freedom to sequence break to the end of the game and kill God or whatever. While I am ambivalent to the existence of the E.M.M.I and the E.M.M.I zones, I actually do love the unnerving vibe they give off. The film grain filter, the off-kilter beeps and bloops, and the nearly untouched sterility. And here's where I feel the most conflicted, because to me it really feels like the E.M.M.I as an idea was almost exclusively Sakamoto's idea. Like, he was so gung-ho about it that this game went through multiple versions across 19 years to get it right. I think it's probably as good as it can be, and I think that they do a valiant effort of connecting it thematically to what was clearly the actual story that Mercury's team wanted to tell, that of the Mawkin and their machinations for galactic domination. There's just enough vague connections between the E.M.M.I and the Chozo that you're left really pondering if they are more related than it seems at first glance. The fact that they can interface with Chozo technology like the suit upgrades and be controlled by central units, which are like miniature mother brains, really gets the gears spinning. It's a secret I'm totally fine with them not revealing in this game, and I think that it helps both thematic sides of the game feel more fleshed out. If there's anything that I was very excited to see carry over from Samus Returns, it's the absurd detail in the backgrounds. Not just the vistas or the beauty of nature, but the amazing statues or the wall art or even the wildlife. Creatures living on ZDR aren't just obstacles. Something as simple as that weird turtle thing in Meridia and Super Metroid always brought me joy. It's one of those things that absolutely does not need to be there and adds nothing mechanically, but it adds so much in terms of flavor and realism. This is something that Castlevania is often even better at than Metroid itself. Dread, though, has so many little details that some guy on YouTube made a 9-part series going over dozens upon dozens of things, from animation to enemy behaviors to Easter eggs. Even the E.M.M.I zones have a great amount of detail in their backgrounds. That gigantic planetary elevator that starts all the way from Hanubia all the way down to Artaria. The robot production line that you can see in the background. This gigantic mecha in the shape of Ravenbeak? What? While we're on the topic of random background details, Ferenia may just be in the top 5 areas in any Metroid game thanks to the ludicrous amount of nerdy eye candy in the background. So many cool images and structures. One thing I find fascinating when it comes to world building is all the statues and iconography of the Armadiggers, aka these weird tusked creatures that bum rush you super fast. The implication to me is that the Makin viewed them in the same venerating light that humans have with dogs or cats, and not only domesticated them, but honored them in this sacred temple. That's so weirdly cute. Look, they even have collars on. Don't you feel like shit for killing them now? Another area that totally owns is Burenia. I love underwater zones in Metroid. I am a freak. Meridia is my favorite area in Super Metroid, Torvus Bogs in Prime 2. The way the water looks in this game is so intensely satisfying. Like, it's a combination of the visual filter as well as the color, as well as the animation and the physical resistance. Makes it feel like I'm really swimming. I don't know, it triggers my primal love for like a heated pool in a hotel. Not to mention, I don't think anyone would argue, but absolutely the best level song in the game. I know this because every hack that I follow that makes Metroid Prime 4 Cope videos uses it or Red Brinstar as the background music. Okay, I can no longer avoid it. Maybe the single biggest issue people have with the game: the music. I actually don't disagree with the general consensus that it sucks, but I don't think it sucks because it's badly made. Some of the music is fantastic and very memorable. Both the Corpius and Experiment Z57 themes are iconic due to featuring in the incredibly excellent first and second trailers for the game that I've watched 1 billion times. Artaria's different themes are great, Burenia is magnificent, and I mentioned before, but I really dig the Makin battle theme. The rest of it, it's not terrible by any means, just kind of misses the mark. I am fine with the more atmospheric area themes. Samus Returns has some absolutely outstanding music. What killed the music for me is the sound font. What the fuck is going on with the instrumentation? Ferenia especially sounds so obnoxious and clownish. This is Dragon Quest levels of generic MIDI. I think because Kenji Yamamoto wasn't the lead composer this time around, I have no idea what went wrong, but in a series with some of the very best music ever to grace a speaker, it's said that so few truly great songs rise to the top here. It's not even a matter of memorability. Like, I remember the penis digital strings in Ferenia and the weird warbly vocals, but just sort of makes me cringe. It's a game I kind of just play with a podcast over the music, sadly, unless I'm in Burenia, of course. Alright, one more big positive thing in this section before wrapping it up. Technical limitations aside, the fact that sequence breaking and a greater sense of freedom has been reintroduced into the series big time after Prime 2, Prime 3, Other M, and Samus Returns all sort of scaled that back, does my heart good. Yeah, it's not as easily broken in half like Super Metroid, but there is a lot of freedom of choice here if you know what you're doing, and I love that the game specifically rewards and expects all kind of bizarre fringe occurrences. Kraid is like a beautiful case study in this phenomenon. In many ways, you could say that Kraid is the peak of the game because of this. Most people know that you can kill a second phase instantly with the early bombs, but you can also climb into his mouth with a flash shift? Why on earth would you even think to do this? And look, I feel like I didn't get to drill down on this hard enough during my section talking about the story and everything. I just kind of lightly touched on this, so I'm here after the fact recording this kind of impromptu. But holy fucking shit, Ravenbeak is the coolest villain Wyatt Phillips could possibly imagine for Metroid or really any other game. You know, that's not to say that he's like a perfect character or anything, but just conceptually, dear God, with everything that I've talked about, you know, that I wanted to see from this series, it's like a fucking wet dream. And he's so amazingly realized in that final boss fight that, honestly, all problems with the ending aside, that 100% makes up for it. Okay, maybe like 80% makes up for it, but you know. I think Mercury's theme is very close to truly cracking the formula of a modern Metroid game and 100% proving to the wider Metroidvania fanbase that they absolutely can make something better than their copycats in every way. The ingredients are all there, the care is there, as well as the restraint. I actually like that they can cut out half the boss fights and even cutscenes to tighten up the game. Yeah, maybe the story I wanted was buried in the cut content, but it's far more likely that the stuff was just extraneous, just stretched the game out for no good reason. I'd much rather have an even better Metroid 6 that uses refined versions of those cut ideas than Metroid Dread be ballooned beyond its capacity. It absolutely doesn't need 12 areas and 40 hours of gameplay. Dear God. In terms of sheer polish and style, Dread manages to rise above decades of advancements in the field of Metroidvanias. It's a real daddy's home kind of moment for me. The lackluster story elements do hinder perfection, but the gameplay is outstanding on every single level, and the amount of added panache to the overall presentation bolsters those weaknesses. I think no matter what the game turned out to be, it was always going to kind of disappoint me in some way. Maybe that's weird to say. I mean, this was quite literally the most excited I've ever been in my life, as I said before. How could I not build up impossible expectations? In a way, though, I am glad how it all turned out. Not only is the game, on the whole, still fantastic and absolutely worth your time, but it gave me a lot of important perspective. How much of myself do I really want to invest in a game or experience like this? Will it happen again with Metroid Prime 4? Almost certainly. But after beating Dread and talking about it with a friend on our year-end podcast, I talked about finally being able to let go, to move on to uncharted waters emotionally and intellectually after the game was done. Maybe that spark will never come again, but Metroid Dread did something special to me, and it did it so hard that even after all this time when I play it now, I still feel just a fragment of that love that I felt back in 2021. Thank you, Metroid Dread, and thank you for watching.